Welcome to Vision Denial. I'm Sam, and this is the road to MSI, where I watch every single playoff game from all 11 participating regions. Yes, including that one. A couple of things to point out at first. Today, we're April 22nd. I have watched all of the games from April 10th, the last series that I did not cover from the last video last week, so the Evil Geniuses vs. FlyQuest series, all the way up until today for the last series that happened today. So I'm all caught up, leaving only 5 of the 81 best of 5 series left happening over the weekend. And that I will still be covering next week, Friday, just to give some time so that I can prepare the next following videos that I got for all of you. That and to cover some ideas about patch notes that'll be released next week, likely. Next, couple of things. It's been announced recently, if I believe so, last night, that the LPL will be participating, but will be participating remotely, still from China, due to the ongoing COVID-19 situation that is happening there. The same reasons as to why they had to delay for a couple of weeks earlier into the, like a couple of weeks ago, are still plaguing them at this current moment due to a lot of the lockdowns, which means that they will now be moving on via remote play, which is something they've been able to do previously versus like matches between them and the LCK in previous years. It's not new technology that they've set up. It should be fairly seamless, with only about 35 ping at most to like delay anything. Most of the other regions, as far as I can tell, have still been able to participate, or will still be able to participate in person, pending anything that happens. The VCS tends to be an outlier, but we'll get there. In fact, from that, just to note, confirm, so the LPL will still be sending their representatives of whoever wins in the finals this Sunday, just remotely. With that, let's cover also the fact that the VCS has started early and a couple of different changes that they put in. So let's go over some of the changes of Vietnam. So the VCS, or the Vietnamese League here, have a couple of notable differences. At the beginning of the series, I mentioned on the bottom over here, to the bottom left, that they would be doing the standard 2-round model of first versus 4th seed and second versus 3rd seed. Winner goes to the finals, and then the losers face off in a 3rd place match. That particular model doesn't necessarily sit well with me, but it does sit well. It does sit better with me than the current now format that they're working on, which is similar, not quite the same, but similar to the old LCK model, where it's 3 rounds, King of the Hill style, which means that the number 1 seed only has one playoff that they have to play to go through. And while currently that may not be a huge deal because the Giveup Marines are also like in a similar position as T1 and Korea, undefeated in their region, this still holds a lot of hard issues in terms of analyzing best of 5s, as well as like how teams are going to do internationally from it if we don't have any particular comparison threads. You can still do so, translating from like weaker teams to stronger teams going on, shows like a difference of scaling and power as well. And it also has the same kind of influence that the Chinese league has. The difference is that they got way more teams, way more comparison models that we can work with compared to the VCS, which only has, last I checked, only 8 teams compared to the 17. They do still do best of 3 series in terms of their regular play, but that is about better than most other leagues who have better playoff models. So I don't necessarily excuse this model But I also understand that because they've also had to move up their playoffs to make sure that they can actually like get their teams through and ready for MSI, this is pretty good still, given also the situation of their entire league and how one-sided it's been so far. So far. The other thing, if you pay attention to what's going on right over there, the VCS also plays their playoff games on patch 12.6. And this is super notable because every other region is playing on patch 12.5 or 12.5b. And the bigger things here to notice are, and I've only highlighted, I've edited the photo here that they used to like quickly look at all the things. Nerfs that happen towards, that are aimed specifically to the professional level for Hecarim. There's some nerfs also to Tryndamere that I think still do affect its priority, but not enough for it to be like completely rid of. So let's go over it, as well as buffs towards Nidalee, Jax, Darius, and Azir. And Jax is notable specifically in the VCS because it had increased priority compared to the other leagues. So Azir has just some simple buffs in terms of his health, makes him a lot more survivable and a lot more willing to be picked in situations. I have yet to see this be consistent within the VCS. Granted, still only 2 series I'd be able to cover for this week. They're still having their finals on Sunday, like a lot of finals are happening on Sunday. Darius just having an increase in terms of the damage to his ultimate. Hecarim nerfs are significant given that it tends to weaken his base damage and his ability to gank. So slower clear speed and harder ability to help up with any particular gank setups. Jax had a whole bunch of stuff increased in terms of his base health, and his magic damage was increased with his W and Power Strike. Nidalee had a bunch of her mana cost adjusted to help things, as well as increase on her E Primal Surge, and the pounce damage has also increased. So this is meant, I think, to help with a lot of the early game ganking. And for Tryndamere, just overall, the cooldown has been like the cooldown on his E spinning slash for critical strike has been reduced, so the amount of times that he can get his E slash back drastically reduced, and the cooldown on his ult early game severely increased. These changes don't super affect pro play on a whole lot of levels, but it does decrease its like juiciness. How much did this affect in terms of like the VCS and how they approach it? I saw a lot more priority on Jax and a lot less priority on Hecarim, especially Hecarim, who could have been great answers to Volibear and a whole bunch of other junglers, and instead tend to default towards a lot more Viego and a lot more Viego, a lot more Lee Sin. So you take that as you will. How much does this make a huge difference between like 12.5 in the other regions and 12.6 here? Not a whole lot. A lot of the same stuff still gets prioritized. The only difference is that now like the options for different 1-4 compositions are reduced, and what is considered priority in terms of early game or priority over jungle picks has reduced by quite a bit. But otherwise, this region has been fairly comparable to the other ones, and so anything that you could glean off of this region when they face off against the other ones should be roughly the same still. Nothing huge had been changed that were like significant enough. With that, let's get started with going through our games. Starting with, we head up to North America with Evil Geniuses versus FlyQuest. Now, there was a lot to like about FlyQuest watching this series. Very solid early game approach, some good understanding of the win conditions, some very consistent vision. The neutral play is a little wonky, but I honestly think that the wonkiness stems from a larger issue of coordination. Multiple occasions we would find solid team fights initiated by either Aphromoo or Jose de Odo, only for there to be a 1 to 2 second delay from the rest of FlyQuest to follow up on the fight, leading to these fights that on paper could be FlyQuest favored, but instead became Evil Genius favored very quickly. Now, Evil Genius on their part were very timid this series, and where there would be some solid neutral setup and good vision play, the fact that tempo and momentum was rarely in their control, or it was just not used, is not a good sign as they go on to face Cloud9. I thought previously Evil Genius would have an easier time dealing with Cloud9, but seeing this approach and how Cloud9 are also incredibly cautious, but much stronger team fighters, better at wave management, and overall play more aggressively, does not give me good hope for Evil Geniuses. Now, FlyQuest, keep this up. Your roster is young for the most part, and recouping for the summer, I could see this team being solid contenders for Worlds. Up next, we are now at the Oceanic, the LCO finals of Order versus the Chiefs. Now, congratulations to Order on being the 5th team to qualify for MSI, and your first title of the region, and your first international attendance. There's a lot to celebrate. Good job, good job, good job. It's a lot of firsts for a team that had 3 straight 3-0 series. And Chiefs made you work for this title in a 5-game series that I for sure actually super recommend watching. Kudos to both the teams. I was worried with the string of lackluster series that my hopes of an improvement from the region was kind of short-lived, but this confirmed it for me. Either team qualifying for MSI would have been good. That said, the Chiefs were for sure the more consistent of the two teams. Stronger vision play, better wave management, solid understanding of neutral and team fight setups. That said, the highs of Order are incredible to watch. They aren't any slouches in the vision or neutral objective approach, especially compared to some of the teams that have already qualified. And while I do hope that the draft choices are cleaned up just a little bit and their vision play becomes more consistent, what they did show us was an excellent sense of how to use their advantages and minimize their weaknesses where they can. Kisei and BioPanther giving incredible performances, especially during that last siege with the Elder buff, and not from a lack of effort from Kevi, Puma, or Corporal. The one concern I do have is that this team seems to have a habit of ignoring or delaying the closing out of a game, as if looking for fights to close it out, but given the lineups they have faced and how often the teams butted head for inches, it does not surprise me that this was their approach. For the first time, I'm genuinely excited to see where the LCO representatives have to show for the international stage. It should be really exciting. Up next, we're going to go to... We're back at the LPL. They've come back, baby. Yes. We're going to go straight to now the start of the double elimination bracket section with Top Esports versus V5. Or Victory 5, however you want to. But yeah. This is the 4th reverse sweep of the season. Now, I highly recommend watching this series too. There's a lot of good series in this particular week's lineup. First things first, that game 1 had me under the impression that there was a team that could honestly beat T1 in MSI. V5 had such incredible vision play, incredible neutral setup, map movement and wave management. It was perfect. And in game 2, while they were behind, they were still proactive while keeping up with vision and finding new avenues to work. It was some solid stuff. And then from game 3 and on, the V5 of the first 2 games started to disappear. The vision not as clean, the neutrals more and more rushed, the wave manipulation completely ignored, and the map movement just became more and more sloppy. Top Esports, for their part, had the inverse. Rough on all accounts, but my goodness, do they improve on every one of the tenets. V5 was landing perfectly in the first 2 games. Both teams play with leads incredibly well, and both fight well behind with some proactiveness. But that said, V5 do have a lower bracket and a chance to come back for the rematch. And I believe they have a chance if they go back to their Game 1 form. I really like that version of V5, where Rookie and Karsa danced around the map, completely messing with people. Top Esports have Knight as the MVP, who, game after game, created so much space for the team to navigate around. And honestly, just does a whole lot of work even around the space that he creates. Top Esports have been more than impressive so far. Next, we stick to the LPL in China for Royal Never Give Up versus JD Gaming. And, well, a 2-week break, and we had 2 crazy reverse sweeps. And this is the 5th one of the season now. Nice. Now, the trend from this series was early game lead becomes late game curse. And that is until game 4 and 5. To start, JD Gaming, there are moments of fantastic macro play, solid neutral setups, and a good amount of catches. And the vision game is fairly good, just not consistent. Kanavi and Hope have been outstanding players for the team when needed. And 369s has some solid control, but the macro choices has caused some headaches that threw the game away. Or threw any of the games away. But much could be said the same for Royal Never Give Up, and respectively Wei, Gala, and Bin. So, what was the bigger difference between the 2 teams? Well, Royal Never Give Up had more consistency early game, or more consistent early game, and neutral control early, and were smarter about how to end the game. There is something to be said when having the first Baron and knowing when your opponent messed up, trying to trade even, given full reign just to plunge, just to get a few kills and win. To clarify, when you have the chance to just choose go to Baron, reset, and good, or you get a whole bunch of kills and you just win, so long as you have the right target selection, which is something Royal Never Give Up also had way more above JD Gaming. It's no surprise that Royal Never Give Up won more often. Now, also, the supports in Missing and Ming have no fear. They'll blindly jump into enemy lines and make fights way harder than needed. Chill out, guys. JD Gaming will be facing off against V5 in the lower bracket for a last chance to get to the semifinals. And while Royal Never Give Up fight Top Esports for a chance at finals. So far, these 4 teams are juicy. Next, we head off to Southeast Asia in the PCS, P with a P, not V, P with a P, PCS with the CTBC Flying Oysters versus the Paris Saint-Germain Talons. And oh boy, how do we put this? If you told me at the start of playoffs that the Flying Oysters was going to knock the Talons into the lower bracket, I would laugh so incredibly hard. And yet, here we are. Game 1 of the series looked way more like what people expected out of the Talons. Strong coordination, excellent neutral setup, solid understanding of win conditions, how to close out games, so on and so forth. The solid, completely almost undefeated team as they were. Sure, the Flying Oysters have a lot of star power from the individual players, but the coordination wasn't matched. Well, surely something happened, because After game 2, the Talons lost all sense of coordination, looked absolutely lost. Do I think something like this will happen again? No. I'm still convinced the Talons will climb back up the lower bracket and win the rematch in the finals against the Flying Oysters. Does that mean that this game was a fluke? Also no. Because games 3 and 4 are where the Talons look disorganized, while game 2 was all Flying Oysters, baby. They looked at what happened to them in game 1 and then executed that exactly against the Talons with excellence. Now, while I don't think it was as clean as the Talons' victory in game 1, the same ideas were brought to the table and executed in a solid fashion. On top of it, even from punishing the mistakes, the Flying Oysters didn't just keep waiting on the mistakes. They kept up their proactive play and ballooned any small lead to something that the Talons just struggled to answer altogether. Even if I think the Talons climbed back up from the lower bracket, what they showed today wasn't enough for MSI. But the Flying Oysters showed play that convinced me that they were solid contenders for the international stage. Next, we're going to head to, sticking to the same region in the Southeast Asian area of the PCS, got J-Team versus Deep Cross Gaming in the lower bracket semifinals. It's where the brackets converge. And, neither team has shown me they can actually end games properly. Both teams in one of these games had a 10K lead. 10K! And they struggled to end games. Deep Cross Gaming, however, is the biggest offender between the two. It doesn't matter how good your early game vision is, or how good your neutral gameplay, or how well you draft or adapt to the draft choices. If at any point I can see one composition be at 10,000 gold behind and it still goes even or even winning team fights, then the winning team is doing something incredibly wrong. As far as I'm concerned, both teams were eliminated in this series. Both of them. Because J-Team will have to face the Talons, who should have fixed their issues from their previous series against the Flying Oysters. I see no way that the Talons we just witnessed will survive 3 games, let alone any series. My biggest problem is how much is done so right from both teams, who just clearly can't convert it into a clean win or even a win in some case. We'll see if there's some improvement from J-Team and or the Talons stick to the funk they were experiencing against the Flying Oysters. But as far as I can tell, neither one of these teams had it. Just not at all. Next, we're back to the LPL, baby. We got Victory 5 versus JD Gaming. And I'm not surprised. I was not surprised at all. Now, where was this V5? Where was this Victory 5 in the previous series? Heck, it even took a game for it to come through. Now, JD Gaming hold the same kind of notes, some solid macro sense, good neutral play, but inconsistent vision, and yet, then the last 2 games of this series said it doesn't matter what your approach is, you better know how to fight and do so quickly. Victory 5 in the last 2 games of the series have shown a tempo that rivals T1, and that is an exciting prospect. If they keep it up. The continuous fighting, stronger laners, still getting leads, good sense how to prioritize some neutrals over others, and accelerate the pace of the game at all times. This would be something cool and exciting if it was shown to us against top esports. Instead, games 1 and 2 matched more of that series, and I'm left here wondering if this is just some sort of momentum issue they have, or if they had a few fluke games that didn't match the regular season performance. If they do keep up the pace of game 3, the game 3 and 4 showed, and hopefully they stick to avoid fights with some obvious disadvantages. But if they stick to this particular momentum, geez, this is a terrifying team. Now, Victory 5 may keep up the tempo, but not all fights are good fights. And it showed that JD Gaming were still able to pull off equal trades while 10k down. And that also personally means that the team has some kinks to work out. If I make that same kind of like call out on J-Team and Deep Cross Gaming in the PCS for that same issue, the fact that V5 is having this issue, the fact that Victory 5 can't do it properly, has me a little concerned also. Next, we head back to the PCS for Paris Saint-Germain Talons versus J-Team, and this series should not have been 5 games. No, this series should not have been 5 games. So, I knew that the Talons were going to win. I had hoped they would fix the issues that plagued them against the Flying Oysters. Well, they aren't quite fixed, but it is trending in that direction. Both teams had similar issues still plaguing them. Drafting one way, not approaching the win conditions properly, having an over-reliance on an individual carry, and marksmen who were not up to the task. Something weird is happening with Unified in this particular set of playoff games. He's not up to form as he usually is. Now, Paris Saint-Germain was the more consistent team, but would often overcommit on plays multiple times in a game that would give advantages to J-Team that would just cost them the whole game, really. While J-Team would look incredibly passive and draft low damage profiles. This series had me convinced that both would still lose to the Flying Oysters, who are looking super hot currently. If it weren't for Hanabi, the Talons would be coin flipping most of the series. And J-Team knew this. J-Team was smart to understand how the Talons functioned, but not proactive enough to act on it all the time. Shut down Hanabi and the Talons can't function. Hanabi is the MVP of this series, getting the most hilarious assassination on Gangplank. But also, Game 5, he had 0 teamfight ults until 40 minutes in, whereas Kennen play quite literally saved the game. If J-Team recognize shut down Hanabi's strategy, the Flying Oysters will too, and they are better at any approach than JT would be. Next, we head to, we're in the VCS, baby, the Vietnamese Challenger Series for Team Secret versus Cerberus Esports or Cerberus Esports. It's one or the other. It's all I can't remember. The VCS is back and with a clean sweep. I want to say that Cerberus doesn't have a whole lot going for them. None of their laners managed well, and Fuquan, yeah, I know, kept struggling to keep with Penguin in the jungle. Draft adaptation was solid, but no matter what happened, it didn't seem like Cerberus would change their approach in the game, even after swapping 2 of their players in Game 3. Now, Secret on their part had some solid vision, some good wave management, and good understanding of how to end games and when. That said, they aren't super consistent on any of those fronts and can look super shaky at times. But, Cerberus didn't do anything to punish or challenge that in any way. The true strength of this team is their ability to balloon gold leads once one is established, gain map pressure when gold is even or deficit, and the margin in which they found wins in team fights is pretty excellent. The team fighting out of this team is excellent. Now, I would be a little bit worried about how one-sided this series was. Given the format, there might be some things missing, unfortunately, that are hard to analyze. But these are the 3rd and 4th seed. But the difference in result from the regular season matched the scoreline we saw today. Now, Secret is facing the Saigon Buffaloes. And they had a tight score with them in the regular season, just losing out on individual matches. So that series should be much closer. Up next, we head to the Latin American region, the LLA, for not just a rematch, but also a finals rematch. I love these. Finals rematches are always a good way to actually lock down something. So, congratulations to Team Ace. All right, we're in the Latin American. Team Ace versus Estral Esports. But congratulations to Team Ace on being the 6th team to qualify for MSI. This was a significant level up from both of these teams in terms of gameplay and overall approach to the game. It's good to see. For Estral, I'm pretty excited to see her approach in summer when qualifying for Worlds, especially from Ace, Bivoy, and Grell. I was very surprised you didn't give Ace a carry for Game 5 when he had come up super clutch for so many of your wins, but maybe something to reevaluate for the next season. Ace, as a team, have shown stronger vision play, some solid but inconsistent neutral setups, some good wave management, and a fantastic team fighting. The coordination between Straight, Lonely, and Dmitry to get fight started was a delight to watch. Especially in Game 5, where not once but twice, Lonely on Mordekaiser just pulls 3 to 4 members of Estral into hostile takeover for the biggest, most satisfying alley-oop. Watch that game. It's so good. It's so good. That said, the inconsistency of how Ace close their games and how they set up neutrals have me slightly concerned for the prospect for the teams they will face in MSI. It's one thing to be solid at team fights and vision control. Most of the teams going are. But if you can't close out games properly, or are too slow at it, or hesitate to set up any play, the other team will get at you, and quickly. But given where you were in the previous series against Estral, this is a welcome step up, and I hope for continuous improvement heading into MSI. Really good. Up next, we're back in North America with the LCS's 100 Thieves versus Team Liquid. It's reverse sweep number 6 of the series. We've had literally most of the reverse sweeps with this particular episode. It's kind of crazy. It is weird to me how slow Team Liquid was to adapt in this series, but also similarly for 100 Thieves. The first 2 games showed something rather exemplary about the way that Team Liquid play the game fast, high pace, and needs early leads to snowball. So when it is executed, it looks fantastic. While 100 Thieves match those kinds of drafts by the time Game 3 rolls around, 100 Thieves says, fuck it, we're not going to do that. Time for some scaling team fights and shut down the early game plays. And it works. Games go late. We head to Game 5 where Team Liquid choose to match, but this time the team fight comp is super awkward. There's a really weird drafting choices out of them. And they still have to rely on some snowballing options really early. It's pretty back and forth, but overall, 100 Thieves make more fringe decisions and riskier plays, and it pays off for them. This is a cool series to watch. Both teams had some excellent vision play, fantastic approaches to neutral objectives, when to set up, contest, and avoid them. So when games come down to team fighting, do you want higher skill ceiling or more creative? Because 100 Thieves seems to check yes for both. They are the more creative and the higher skill ceiling team fighting. They have more coordinated on global plays, more coordinated in team fights with many more creative approaches. Now, while I don't think the rematch for the series will go exactly like this, Team Liquid better have better draft adaptation. I do think it should be just as close, however. And yes, that means that regardless of what the winner of the Evil Genius versus Cloud9 series is, I think that Team Liquid would just win either one of those matchups. Neither one of the other teams have shown me anything that Team Liquid could not just easily sniff out. Next, we got, coming back to the LPL, we've got Royal Never Give Up versus Top Esports. And Top had a huge lead, and because of their consistent fumbles during the mid to late game, just couldn't end it. That fourth game shows a lot about how both teams approach their styles. And while Top start off strong in the early game and keep up or increase the tempo where they set it, they don't look for ways to consistently balloon the leads and often leave themselves open for mistakes and avenues for their opponents to come back with. Now, while Royal Never Give Up have a fairly weak early game, the draft they use often gives them some avenues for the late game to work with. Now, and both of these worry me from both of the teams, as this is the upper bracket finals. These are the two main prospects for MSI representatives, and both of the playstyles just won't fly against the other representatives that have qualified, who play strong early games that balloon the leads and have strong late game approaches. You need both, not one or the other. I'm also, frankly, a little baffled at the very weak vision approach and bizarre map movements or macro choices they employed across the series. Now, if Victory 5 is back in form, big if, for the rematch they have against Top Esports, and they make the grand finals in full form that we saw, then I couldn't see either of these teams qualifying for MSI. It'd likely be Victory 5. Next, we head back to the PCS. Again, not just for a finals or a rematch. It's a rematch finals. And it goes differently this time. Oh, it doesn't usually do that. Where we've got Paris Saint-Germain Talons versus the CTBC Flying Oysters. And congratulations to the Talons on being the 7th team to qualify for MSI. These were the favorites to win the whole thing, and while the Flying Oysters did impress and surprise, the Talons were ultimately the ones to get it all. This series solidified that the coordination of the Talons is still there and strong. Some fantastic vision play, team fights, and macro sense that really knocked it out of the park. So why wasn't it more convincing for so much of it? Mostly what concerns me is the sense that any given point the Talons lose confidence and overstep with plays that don't make sense in the grand scheme of the game. But with that loss of confidence, it's clearly something that the players at the moment think is the best play to work with. The Flying Oysters also show that the Talons struggle to play when they are behind and have no tempo control, making it very easy for me to see other international teams take full advantage of that. That is, if they play like they did for half of their series. The finals and their first series showed us what the Talons are at their peak. The initial Flying Oyster series showed us what it is when their coordination is completely off. If I was a betting person and looked at the history of this organization at international fence, they're 4-time winners in their region, and they are super solid in international events. I'd say we should probably expect the Talons to be at their most solid coordinated selves. Well, at least that's what I expect. But I'm holding my breath just a little bit. Next, we head back to North America for the in LCS for Evil Geniuses versus Cloud9. And I kind of expected this. I was concerned it was going to go a different way, but I kind of expected this. Because I'm not surprised at the end result. I'm more surprised at how much Evil Geniuses improved to get there, but I'm not surprised that Cloud9 lost the series. Hubris brought Cloud9 down on their repeated drafting of 1-3-1 siege-based snowballing needing compositions, a thing that North America seems to like a whole lot and is punished easily. And Evil Geniuses called this out, drafted simple, and said, let's go. Take the fight. There's a lot we could say about how Cloud9's approach, but the lack of adaptability is the most notable thing still. Not the shallow vision or overzealous team fights or the lack. It's really just the lack of adaptability that's their problem. Even Evil Geniuses on their part had a similar problems in terms of adaptability in game, but in game, not between games. The fact that Evil Geniuses allowed Cloud9 to have Drake Soul win conditions for 3 games in a row is not okay. Better team would take these conditions and run away with it like lightning. What's commendable is how well Evil Geniuses take their early leads, balloon them with map pressure and or gold, and actively worked to limit any avenue C9 or Cloud9 would come back from. Evil Geniuses also fell prone to some issues of overzealous approach and some very bizarre neutral setups that could have gone very wrong. And because of it, I'm very hesitant to see them pull a victory against Team Liquid, but we'll see if they can match the lane aggression and solid tempo control that Team Liquid offers against them. Next, we go back to the LPL in China for a rematch of Top Esports versus Victory 5. And as rematches usually go, it ended the exact same way. I'm only kind of surprised here. And again, Victory 5 Game 1 is like a nice appetizer to a meal you'll never have. Credible vision, solid approach to neutrals, some dicey early game, but always proactive. And then Top Esports comes in, warmed up, and ready to go and say, we can do that in the early game and dominate. And much of what I said in their first best of 5 against Victory 5 still applies here. Both teams show some great potential. The only difference being is that Victory 5 doesn't actually know how to respond well behind, it seems. And Top Esports struggle to close out games that last more than 30 minutes. And I want that to stick out. Because across the 5 best of 5 games, or the 4 best of 5 games they played, they showed some serious issues in terms of coordinating map movement, when to properly engage in neutral play, in terms of the later the games get. But like the last 2 games of this series, once a lead is taken super early, they'll push it and snowball it like no tomorrow, and end the games decisively under 25 minutes. Knowing exactly how to approach the scenario with it all. It's super weird. Why do they know specifically how to end the game cleanly once they have a super lead pre-25 minutes, and then like post 30 minutes it gets super funky and lost? As they head to the finals to get another rematch series against Royal Never Give Up, who, similar to Victory 5, are fairly consistent late game, but not as much early game. If Top Esports don't shake off their late game issues, they may lose the rematch against Royal Never Give Up, but only if they can weather or fix their early game. And that doesn't give me a lot of hope for the LPL representatives going into MSI. Gives me a lot of concern. Next, for our last series of the video, we're back in Vietnam for the VCS's Saigon Buffalo versus Team Secret. And as expected, this was a close series. It was also super slow to start, but my goodness does it end explosively. Both of these teams have some spunk, moxie, and all around a lot of grit and bite to them. The issue is that it comes at the price of consistency. Vision is often super shallow or sparse unless you're really far ahead in the game. Some members overstep or caught out trying to gain lane pressures as if they become super unaware of the goal difference between the two teams. The neutral setups were often up in the air or non-existent. Usually it's just a setup for fight in awkward patterns. And gold rarely would get ballooned in an efficient manner. Now, while the series went super back and forth, making it seem like either team could have gone through with like no difference, The Saigon Buffaloes have shown a better use and understanding of how to use their leads, or how each team's win conditions applied, and better adaptability during drafts, especially between games. More games looked in the favor of the Saigon Buffaloes, and Team Secret looked like they were just responding, or were just too slow even to execute their own plan, to the point that like the games felt more like games that Saigon Buffalo had to lose more than Secret controlled when to win. With this, how do I think they'll fare against the Gigabyte Marines? Not great. The aforementioned inconsistencies matched with, how dominating the season that Gigabyte Marines is having this moment has me convinced that the Saigon Buffalo doesn't have what it takes to win and should hope just to not get 3-0'd by them. So what are my thoughts after the week? Well, given that we only have about 4 teams left to qualify in the whole thing, one finals on Saturday and another 3 on Sunday, the teams that are left to qualify are the North American representatives, who I'm not super confident in but could work with, the LPL representatives, who are becoming a little bit more lackluster, which is super unfortunate from the region, the Vietnamese representatives, which I still have to see how the Marines play to really get a whole feel for the whole situation, and then the Brazilian representatives, who, as a whole, Brazil looked like they leveled up, but not enough for me to think that there's going to be much tear. And with the current representatives that have qualified, I'm sitting here thinking G2 is the only straight competitors to beat T1. I don't like how that sounded. Ugh. But honestly, out of the 7 teams currently qualified, before the other 4 go through and before the finals happen, because the finals could change my mind completely for all 4 remaining regions left, G2 out of the LEC still seems to be the strongest contender to beat T1, and T1 still seem to be the favorites to win the whole thing. Just straight up. And that's just mostly from cursory glance at this point. So we'll see how things go. We'll see how the patches develop. We're still waiting on patch 12.8. I'll probably do a review of that next week. In terms of like patterns that I'm seeing a whole lot of Nocturne. There should be a whole lot of no. Just no Nocturne. Just none. It would be a happy day if I never see another Nocturne ever again. Please, just please, for once. Because the issue comes here is that for Nocturne to work, you need an early game draft where all of your laners, or 2 out of 3 of your laners, win super early and have very aggressive leads from it. But those tend to fall off, so you can't really risk those. And then you end up in a situation where Nocturne is in an awkward position to, hopefully, the enemy jungler doesn't snowball or any of the enemy laners don't snowball. And then when they hit level 6, then you have to be able to spike mid-game and really ramp up the pacing at this point, in which case you should have had control of the early game. And then, you win really quickly as fast as you can? That's an anomaly. It happens, you will see it a lot if you watch a lot of the games, but on a comparison basis, most of these games run 30 to 40 to 50 minutes on average. And Nocturne loses its usefulness really quickly. And any particular draft that would benefit, that would help Nocturne not fall off straight off on the mid game, falls off by the time 40 minutes hits in. And most of the drafting options, you have so many choices. There are so many jungler choices at this current point, either 12.5, 12.5B, or 12.6, regardless of the patch. So many options still exist, and you choose. For the life of me, you still choose to go Nocturne? I'm gonna lose it. Also, the red side blue side conversation is also becoming like a little bit more weird, and it's really unfortunate because I'm not seeing a whole lot of teams properly use the red side for drafting still. It's not coming through, and I think I've mentioned it. I think I've mentioned this every week at this point, but blue side seems to still be the stronger of the two sides, and it's becoming a mental thing for a lot of teams who are just not used to using the red side for draft advantages. If you're going to be first picking things, you might as well just take blue side, and blue side would help you with a better navigation of things. You have your guaranteed draft, it's easier to navigate. But it is a regional thing, right? Some regions, the red side was really ramping up. A lot of the emerging regions, actually, as a matter of fact. Very few emerging regions where the blue side was the side that was winning all the time. In a lot of the legacy regions, blue side was what really was focused on. And it's really interesting to see this conversation go up because it's the losing team for the most part. The LPL has a very different system when it comes to like the king of the hill portion of their playoffs. But for the most part, in almost every single playoff scenario, the losing team chooses. So when a losing team chooses blue side and they lose on the blue side, the red side will tend to look better. But I think it's just because the winning team is better at adapting and is a better draft. Well, not necessarily better drafter, but better at adapting from the different sides. Well, those are my thoughts going through everything in terms of like the last week. And I've caught up with all the games at this point. There's only 5 best of 5s left. We'll find out between those 5 best of 5s who remains as the last 4 qualifying teams. I will be covering those 5 best of 5s, those 5 series next week on Friday. And at the same time, by that time, we should be seeing the patch 12.8 come out. Fingers crossed. It's usually every 2 weeks, and the 12.7 7 came out last week, so that should track. I also am in the current works of some very interesting videos. It just takes time, so they'll come out after next week's video. So not next week, but the week after, right before MSI happens. With that, I would love to hear your thoughts below based off of everything that's happened. We've got 7 regions are done. 4 are about to be finished with only one region having 2 best of 5s left in the LCS. And so, like, I want to see, are there any of the currently qualified teams that you're super excited to see? Do you think that any of them still have a chance against T1? I'm totally not convinced yet. And is there any prospective team from the last 4 regions that you think could have a chance or would be exciting to see? What about your thoughts on like the current draft choices and all that stuff? I would love to hear your thoughts below. And thank you again for all of you who do watch and have watched from the beginning. Really appreciate it. And if you're new, leave a like, subscribe, do the whole YouTube shenanigans stuff, right? Thank you all for watching. My name has been Sam. This is Vision Denial. I'll see you next week.